and he starts to go. And burglary is nonviolent crime, and smashing my car window is nonviolent, and stealing $900 worth of stuff out of the thing is not nonviolent. But
just to let you know, because you should know.
Hey, today I'd like to interview Kevin Faulconer, or we are not like to interview. We're going to interview Kevin. He's right here in studio. Kevin is an icon in San Diego, former mayor, former city council member, and currently a candidate for County Board of Supervisors, District 3. Kevin's going to share with us his story and the things that he believes are going to be needed to change the direction that we're going. I think this is going to be a great interview. I'd like to just say hi to Kevin. He's sitting right next to me. So first of all,
I appreciate that very warm introduction, Mark.
Before we go on, I want to say that we did that 3 times.
We did 3 times.
Because he has a lot, because Kevin did a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And I distinctly remember a time when I was with Byron Ware, and we were at Point Loma High School. I believe it's Point Loma High School.
Yeah.
I think David Wells was out there and stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure it was.
And you were actually just running for city council.
Yep.
Yeah,
What?
Instrumental in putting a new track on the field. Do you remember that? I remember it. There was something about the.
There was a lot of Point Loma High boosters that
Yeah,
did that.
that's
but
right.
Yeah, it was,
how many years ago was that?
Oh man, that was a long time
Right.
ago.
So I remember you walking. You got a new track, and you're walking with Byron Ware, and I was.
Yeah,
sitting
but
up
his
there in the
story
audience.
is of resilience, because
sure.
he ran once,
Right.
and he goes, "I ran, and I don't think was it the first time."
No,
he
that's
ran?
absolutely right. Ran for city council in District 2. By the way, good to see you too.
Good to see you.
Thanks. Said hello to Mark. Said hello to Frank. No, that's right. I mean, as we were talking about before, very rarely in politics is everything a straight line. And the very first race I ran and won for city council did not win, and then came back a second time and won, and then was fortunate enough to serve 2 terms on the San Diego City Council, and then obviously 2 terms as mayor. So. Quite a history that we've had, all of us, together over these years.
Well, it's 16 years.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, almost a decade and a half, over a decade and a half.
Probably 2 decades if you combine all the stuff that he was doing even before, because he was in Point Loma. I remember just shaking it up before he ran. There's a reason why he ran, because he was a
Because we
community
needed
leader,
somebody,
right? And so let's just talk about this, Kevin, because we live in San Diego. Mark and I are born and raised in San Diego. There was a time where people were running to downtown to buy those new condos. They were going to build the stadium. They built the stadium. Petco Park came up. It was a booming industry. There was restaurants going. You felt safe down there. I remember the cops would they would put the cops on the bicycles, and you could just have fun, and there was nothing going on. I'm telling you, Kevin, I don't go to downtown anymore. Not because I don't have business down there. It's because it's so depressing. It is so depressing to see what's going on with human beings. Nothing against the homeless, man. They're people. But what the heck happened? I said this earlier. When you're in office, this wasn't there. So hopefully we can go over the homeless situation, because you must have had something you were doing that didn't create what we have now. These are some things I want to talk about.
No, I appreciate that.
Ones,
and I'll tell you, all of us worked very hard for a number of years on downtown San Diego, and it's been tough the last couple of years. There's been no doubt about it. And I will tell you, Frank, we learned a lot of hard lessons while I was mayor in really the space of homelessness, and it was something that, as I think back and remember, there would always be arguments: is it the city or the county's responsibility? And at one point, I just said, look, we've got to do things different. And, I'm going to be held, accountable as mayor, and rightfully so, even if you're not technically responsible for some of the things like mental health and others from the county. And it was at that point where we jumped in and we just said, look, we're going to put up bridge shelters. We're going to make a difference on the streets. We're going to bring the help and the support at scale. And that is something that I felt very strongly about, because it just wasn't working before. And when I look at, all of the great providers that are doing great things, but it wasn't the leadership that we needed. So I jumped in and I said, we have to do things different. We became the only big city in California while I was mayor that actually reduced homelessness, reduced it by double digits. That wasn't easy.
Huge.
It was hard.
Well, we see it now.
And I
Well, it's not reducing now.
That's what I mean. We know it's difficult because
Like,
it's exploding.
Well, Kevin,
doubling.
that's unbelievable. You left, and it seems like we took 10 steps backwards.
Yeah.
it's been going the wrong direction.
Right.
There's no doubt, and the numbers are up. But as you all know, and I'm glad you said what you said, Frank. It's about people, right? I mean, and so it's somebody's brother, sister,
Absolutely.
mother, father who's on the street, and it's something that I feel very strongly about, that we have to intervene.
Right.
You cannot allow tents on sidewalks in front of somebody's house and businesses. You have to intervene and say, we have a place for you to go. You have to provide that place, and I feel very strongly about that. That costs money. That costs, you have to provide the services. But when you do that, it can work. But you also have to say, we're going to intervene. We're not going to allow some of this behavior to happen. And that's why we focus so much on we're going to enforce our quality of life laws, because it's not fair for the individual that's on the street, particularly who is going through either mental health or substance abuse issues.
Right.
And it's certainly not fair for neighbors,
Business
families,
owners.
kids that are going to school, businesses, et cetera. And so we were able to create a significant and different model in San Diego that worked. We had over 30 different cities that came to look at the ecosystem, if you will, that we had set up, which says we're going to put up bridge shelters, we're going to bring mental health services to those shelters, we're going to bring in housing navigators, job placement. We created a new division at the San Diego Police Department, the Neighborhood Policing Division, who was responsible for enforcing our quality of life. And again, we made a huge difference. We need to take that exact same approach county-wide.
Right.
And that's why I'm running for supervisor, one of the big reasons, which is, the city has an obligation, but the county has a huge obligation to be a bigger leader, to provide not just financial help and services, but to help with, where are we going to put up shelters? What are we going to do to actually make a difference? And to do it consistently, because you cannot have every different city doing something different. Again, we learned what to change and how to make a real difference, and we did that.
So
What about that PERT team? Who put that in the psychiatric emergency response team? Those are the people that go with the social workers that go with PD.
and that's a good team.
a good
I've
team.
actually called
It
them.
works. It's a psychological help. It's our homeless outreach team combined with our neighborhood policing division. And again, the neighborhood policing division was one that we created from scratch. And then our then chief of police Shelley Zimmerman and our current chief Dave Divslite, who's continued that, does a great job. But you have to fund it. You have to support it. And I think what we've seen, unfortunately, is we've seen too many of our great officers that have left our department. You've seen that number
30%.
It's unsustainable.
Right.
And so when I talk about, again, the things that we learned, which is you have to provide that help and the support. You have to ensure that you have quality of life enforcement. And you have to do the things that I said make sense and to do it county-wide. And so what we're seeing right now in the county is, unlike when I was mayor and it went down by double digits in the city, it's now spiking 20%, over 20% in the county of San Diego. They're failing. We need to change that. And again, this is something that not only will I bring the experience, but I think more so the leadership and the tenacity that says we cannot allow this status quo to continue. It ain't working.
It's the tenacity part that I like about you, because I can tell you a story that happened to me. I was in downtown San Diego and I saw this guy really feeding this homeless guy. And I just checked it out, and he had socks from him. Like, that's a good guy, And I said, hey man, that was nice of you. And he goes, that's my son. So this guy, the drug addiction is so bad.
It's heartbreaking, man.
It's heartbreaking.
It's heartbreaking.
So what I thought to my head was, this guy is not homeless. This guy's just not allowed to live in a home because he has a drug addiction, which turns into a mental illness crisis. So that's the intervention that we need, because they have houses. They just got kicked out of them because of their addictions.
Yeah.
What do you think we should do about that part, the drug addiction? Because you see them shooting, they're doing drugs on the streets, Kevin. And to tell you the truth, the cops are rolling by. There is no enforcement on anything. They're having sex outside. They're doing drugs. I think just like 85% of all violent crimes are homeless against homeless. I know I got that number from somebody who I know in Scripps Hospital. You know, like everyone who comes in there from downtown is homeless on homeless. You can't report it. The cops they don't know who to go to.
Yeah, I would tell you, I think you've really touched on something there, and that is important because when you talk about reducing violence, when you're helping people get off the street, you're reducing violence.
You're reducing violence, right?
And that's just a truism,
right?
And so to be specific, you know, it really has to say, if it's the number one problem,
right,
which it is,
right,
you act like it.
Right.
And you do things differently.
Yeah.
And you say, we're going to make a change and we're not going to accept it. So
Right.
you're going to look at the things that are working. You're going to provide more mental health services, period. Not just from county mental health, but step-down facilities. You're going to say the county should be a regional leader in providing shelter and providing that support and not letting it go just to every individual city because it's not working, again, at the scale that we need to. And the approach that I took, that I said, again, we're going to provide that help and the support, but then we're going to insist that you use it. Right. And getting back to intervening, because if you don't intervene, Frank, if you don't say, I'm not going to let you kill yourself on the street
Right.
doing heroin and methamphetamine, it's not going to work.
Right.
You can't just say, I hope
Yeah.
you make a different
Hope's
decision.
not a good strategy.
It doesn't work. It never does. And so that's where the leadership comes in that says, if it's going the wrong direction, change it.
Right.
And take steps that say we're not just going to continue the status quo.
Right.
And I think, again, that's one of the reasons why I think no matter where you live in San Diego County, you want to see change. And that's why I feel so strongly about it.
So, Frank, let me go in a different direction than you went into. You said a lot of the people that become homeless it's because of drugs, which is true. But there's also a lot of people that have untreated mental health issues that end up doing drugs to self-medicate.
Right. Take
So,
the pain
and
away.
you just touch upon it. So, can you just go in a little bit more detail about how we're going to get that mental health issue covered here?
Yeah, it is both. And
Okay.
you're right, Mark. I mean, if you look at it, and the statistics will show over 50% are either have mental health or substance abuse, duly diagnosed.
Right.
And so that's why you have to attack it, the same way and say we're not going to just say it's okay to be living in a tent and our sidewalks and going through what we're going through. We're going to say you're going to have to go use this shelter, and we're going to insist that you do it. And again, treating every person as the individual that they are, knowing that that's just something that you have to do, but also saying that we're going to insist, as I said, that we're providing the help, but we want to make a difference in somebody's lives. And if you don't get there, if you don't have that attitude,
Right.
if you're just going to say, I'm just going to let it continue, it's unsafe, it's unclean, it's unsanitary.
It's unethical.
And we cannot allow San Diego County to see to turn into what we're seeing in other counties across this great state of ours. It's fragile. And when we look at some of the other counties and what they're doing in this attitude of hands off, it doesn't work. Businesses leave, people leave.
Right.
And it's fragile. And this isn't, by the way, this isn't a partisan issue. This is a common sense issue that says, how are we going to ensure that we're doing the right thing? You're going to make the tough decisions. We're going to intervene. Because I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat, we need to make a change on our streets.
Absolutely.
Right.
This cannot be treated like a partisan
My
issue.
daughter goes to UCLA. So I go up to LA often to see her. They have 70,000 homeless people. Right. And I had this fear that San Diego is heading in that direction of LA and San Francisco.
Right.
That we all sit around and go, who the hell is going to do anything about it? Like, at what point do we finally get somebody that says, hey, the buck stops here? I think you're that point.
Well, we are, and we've been there. And again, if you don't say the buck stops here and make the changes to scale, Mark, like you can't just go around and say, oh, we opened up 10 shelter beds here and we did 15. Right. That's not going to do it.
Doesn't work.
That's why we did the bridge shelters that said you can have several hundred. That's why you're going to bring the help and services. That's why during COVID, when we brought everybody into the convention center and we said, we're going to bring all of these services here and we're going to look at every single person and say, what's preventing that person from getting their place of their own?
That's good.
What do we need to do to provide that help and services so not only can they leave the convention center, but stay off the streets for good? And we transitioned 1,000 people out of that. That's the type of impetus I'm talking about. That's the kind of determination and working, closely with our landlord community, which we did, particularly with our veterans, that say, hey, we need your help. We're gonna get some folks that we need to get off the streets into units. We're gonna provide some of that help and support. It is a constant effort, but when you do it, when you see the smile on somebody's face who says, "I got that place of my own. I finally kicked this.
Right.
This addiction. I'm finally got a job." And when I think vividly to so many times when I was down at Alpha Project in the bridge shelter down there with Bob McElroy and the phenomenal people. And that's what, at the end of the day, that's what it's about. It's about helping and changing lives. And Bob will be the first to tell you, hey, in order to do that, man, you got to give some tough love.
Yeah, you got that right. He is a tough guy.
Yeah,
He
looks like
he's a big tough guy with a big heart.
Big heart, right? Exactly. Like all of us. I was going to ask you something for our viewers. Can you define what a bridge shelter is? Because that's a term that not many people, we know it, but what is an actual bridge shelter?
Well, we named it that way because it was a shelter that's a bridge. Right. It is this whole thing on housing first. Well, no, you've got to get somebody stabilized first.
Right, exactly.
That's just period.
Right.
And so we created that. We said, this is going to be a bridge. This is going to be a bridge from the street into that place of your own. And so in order to do that, and we brought, showers, meals, laundry, mental health, all of that. And so we created this environment that says, hey, we're going to give you the help and the support. We're going to give you a place to go. We're not going to let you stay out in a tent somewhere out there. We're going to come on in and make this, and we spent a lot of money on it. Again, we became a model. We need more of it.
Right.
Just bottom line, we need more of it. The county should be a leader in that effort. I will be a leader in that effort. And we will work closely with all of our cities. Again, this is something that we can make a huge difference on, but you've got to treat it like the emergency that it is and not just do the same thing over and over.
Well, they call it a crisis. Treat it like one.
Right. We had a COVID crisis. Look what we had to do. Shut down. The whole country was shut down. We have masks. We had restrictions. And now we know the homeless crisis is a real crisis. It's just a matter of time before we get the Hep A again. That's going to go on the streets.
How can you not get it?
How can you not get it?
Because they're going to the bathroom on themselves. It's inevitable.
So my question to you, Kevin, is when you have a heroin addict on the street, and then you got a shelter to put him in, and then you got a policy that says you don't have to get sober. You can just come in because that's they call it housing first, which means you don't have to kick your habit. You could just go in there and you have a place to stay. Why is the city hiding heroin addicts in these shelters? What's going to happen to that guy in the shelter? He's going to start tearing up the place. He's going to go nuts like he did with every house he's ever been in, destroying. He's going to go right back in the street.
Well, you have to have rules and you have to have consequences.
Yeah.
And I've also learned, that there's no one size fits all policy, right, Frank? If I look at, for example, if I look at Donnie D and the rescue mission and what they're doing, phenomenal work, and they're branching out countywide. They have a really strict no substance policy, period. None. They're faith-based. They work. They don't take a dime, by the way, from city government.
Oh, wow.
So they and again, that's an important part of the ecosystem, if you will. You look at other places, and you go back to, for example, what we were just talking about earlier with Bob McElroy. You cannot use inside, but do we know that people come in that are high and others? Sure, they do. But you have to be able to come in and say, this is why we're gonna break this. We're not going to allow bad behavior to happen. If somebody's doing that, they boot them out. And that's why it's so, again, incredibly important that you say there are going to be consequences for actions. We're not just going to allow this type of stuff to happen. Not everybody believes that, by the way.
No,
some folks say, no, if somebody wants to be out there, you should be able. I fundamentally disagree on that.
Well,
put them in their
you
front
cannot
yard.
run a city and a county that way.
You got some stuff on your chin, Mark.
Put that. Is it gone?
Yeah, it's gone.
Do I look pretty for cameras?
You look beautiful.
Thanks.
So here's what I'm going to tell you. There is a percentage of people that will not make it in. They're not going to follow anything. They'll have to be housed forever. I think there's people with such psychiatric problems out there. You see them. They're yelling at trash cans or eating paper, and they're just out there. Now, what I would say is back in the day, when I was in law enforcement, if you had a guy acting up, you could arrest him and put him in CMH for a 72-hour eval. Okay, so you got a 72-hour eval, but the only way he gets out is he says, he's not going to do harm towards himself or feel like killing anyone. Do you feel like harming anyone? Oh, he can go. Why can't you implement a better law? And those guys who are fighting it, who gives a shit what they say? Because it's inhumane to allow someone to sleep in a tent and think he wants to sleep in a tent. Even if he says, I love it out here, I'd like to do my drugs. The reason why is because you're not competent to make that decision, because you have drug-induced psychosis, you don't know what's going on, let's get you on. There's no one who really wants to live in the street. So those who believe they do, you're not
I
following
agree with that,
them.
100%.
Yeah, get your feet on the street and go out there and talk to those guys. They don't really want to be out there. So why can't we implement, and this is going to be law or program, where it goes back to Reagan, where there's certain people that are going to go, you're going to go in here, not on a 72-hour watch, but a 30-day detox.
Yeah.
And then after... Okay, go ahead.
And to your point, I think what we're finally starting to see, for example, is laws that are strengthening conservatorship, which is
Correct.
incredibly important.
That's what I like.
That makes all the sense in the world. Again, it's about intervene.
Right.
And yes, you have to have very strict rules of the road because you don't want to go the wrong way on that.
Right.
But you have to be able to say, we're going to help and we're going to insist that you do it. And again, with all the protections that are surrounding that. And if we're having an explosion in mental health on our streets, then we ought to have an explosion in mental health services.
I agree.
We have to match the problem. And if we're not expanding that, if we're just saying we're still going to do things at county mental health the way we've always done it, if we're not going to increase the ability to have capacity, if we're not going to increase some of our step-down facilities that allow people to transition back,
Right.
we're not going to make the change on the streets that we need. We can be the county that does that. We can be the county that
The
says,
leaders.
look, we're seeing what's happening in other parts of California. It takes political will. And when you see that things make a difference, when we first started the bridge shelters, folks were very, hey, I don't want this shelter. I don't want it. But when they saw that it was working, when they saw that we were serious of not allowing tents on the sidewalk, when we saw the change, then people said, yeah, this is working. How can I come down and help? The two have to go matched hand in hand. And when we brought, for example, the county mental health trailer to be part of the shelter, because the whole thing was, let's not have all these different silos, man. Let's provide all the help, but let's do it consistently. Right. And I can't emphasize that enough. If you don't have a consistent approach, if you change your mind on what you're going to do in terms of the approach now that we've seen unfortunately in San Diego, you're going to see what we've seen, which is these numbers spike dramatically. Huge. And that's not what anybody wants to see. As I said, we learned so many lessons and we learned from so many successes. Right. And so, again, I think that this is the seminal issue right now in our county. Our homeless issues combined with public safety issues, and we need to have an approach that says we're going to look out after people, we're going to protect our families, we're going to protect our quality of life, and because if you don't have a safe county, you don't have anything.
I agree with you.
Let me go off in another direction. So when you were the mayor of San Diego, you created this kind of a sister relationship with Mexico. We had a really nice kind of
good relationship,
camaraderie.
Oh, sure.
And because you used to go to Mexico.
Often. We
go
are
there.
Very proud of binational cities.
So we have what I found here, and Frank and I know because we sell real estate, people are selling their homes in San Diego because they can't afford to buy in this county, and they're moving to Mexico. They could commute back and forth. But I also see a large number of Mexican nationals buying houses in San Diego. And the reason why, and they have a lot of money, but the reason why a lot of them are seniors on fixed income. So how can you facilitate, because you'll be in the county now, a little bit of an expansion of getting some affordable housing units going, because we really need them, and it seems like the county. There's a lot of areas in the county that are building.
A lot of open space.
We have to. Obviously, two big important issues there. First and foremost,
well, that's why we're talking about them.
I like Mark's issue.
Went from homeless to hey, what are you going to build in these counties?
Because I'm going to tell you, because when he gets elected to the county board of supervisors, this is what they're going to ask him.
Yeah, absolutely.
You cannot talk about homelessness without housing.
Right, exactly.
But I do want to touch on something real quick, because our relationship, our binational region is something I'm very proud of, and the work that we did with Tijuana, our neighbors next door. The cross-border collaboration is incredibly important. That's a strength. That's an asset for us.
Right.
And so we need to have elected leaders that understand that know that,
It's
and that
huge.
foster that.
Very important.
On the issue of creating more housing, I'm glad you touched on that, Mark, because we have a supply issue.
Right.
If you don't increase the supply,
Right.
you're not going to bring down prices or at least make it anywhere near affordable for somebody to get that house of their own, to be able to afford rent in an apartment. Right. If you pass policies that say we're in essence going to shut down development, which is the unfortunate reality that we saw our county board of supervisors do,
Yep.
and the current incumbent who I'm running against, who said, we're going to pass some of the most strictest draconian rules that make it almost impossible to create new housing. Well, then you can't say it's important and then not
do
actually
anything.
provide
Yeah.
the ability to have the American dream for our working families. And so you have to have a balance. You have to be able to say, yes, we're going to increase our housing supply. And you can't just say it. You actually have to back it up.
to do it.
And the things that we did while I was mayor was all about how do we increase your ability to build housing? How are we going to be able to make that do by right so it doesn't take forever
Right.
to go through the political process?
Yeah,
How do we,
permit process.
how do we encourage it next to transportation lines? But how do we ensure that it actually gets built?
Right.
And
That's
so
it.
if you're not focusing on building the units and looking at the supply that's coming in, then you're not doing a damn thing.
Right.
And so that's why these twin issues,
Right.
they are so interrelated right now in San Diego County. Homelessness and housing affordability and expanding housing supply.
Right.
You have to have somebody who's going to say, I'm not just going to talk about it, I'm actually going to do something
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. That's what
So-
I know about Kevin. Oh, go ahead. I was going to say what I know is that he's one tough guy, which means, and I'm not trying
He's
to throw him out
resilient.
there like he's great, but I've seen what he
Right.
can do. So the problem is the current government is treating everyone with this victimization. Here's a victim. You got to coddle them. Hey, leave them alone. They have their rights. Don't bother them. And to me, that's destroying them. They need tough love. They need to be
Well,
put.
there's a couple of people that are in line with Kevin. A couple, but we're talking about. There's a lot of elected. There's a couple, but what I know about you and I and Frank, we all have kids, and I don't think I want to kick this can down the street.
Yeah, that's right.
For my kids.
Right.
And I
I have kids too. I
Yeah.
want them to be able to afford a
Bingo.
place here, and I worry about that. I'm a
Yeah.
dad.
Right.
It's the same thing, and they're in school right now. And I think back to what housing prices were when I was just getting
Right.
started,
You
and
can
what
actually
they are
buy
now.
one.
And I worry about that. And so rather than just worry about it, and rather about than just virtue signal, which we're
Right.
seeing so many people do, let's actually pass some policies. They're going to have people create housing. Let's do it right. Let's put it where we should. Let's don't put it where we shouldn't. But let's actually build some units.
Let's get 'em
and
built.
that is, I think if you don't have that attitude, it's not going to change. And again, this is something that really comes down to leadership. It comes down to saying, we know what to do, having the experience. And obviously, you're seeing, in the realtor space, look, if we're not creating more product, if we're not making that, again, it's about the American dream. It's about having intergenerational wealth that you can pass
Exactly.
on. That is the foundation of so many things that all across, all demographics, all ethnicities. It's just fundamental to a successful, thriving economy and our family life. And so you have to have, again, leadership that's going to say, well, we're actually going to do something about it.
Okay, so Frank, look, we've done two hot button issues.
yeah,
Wait, homelessness
Right.
and housing. And the third one is crime. Because what happened is
They're all
with
intertwined, aren't they?
Prop 49 and Prop 47, the realignment, we've turned the San
joke.
Diego County Sheriff's Department into a prison.
Right.
And these guys are in there 10 years, whatever. They're serving their prison terms in our jails.
In the current
AB
jail,
109, the
Yeah,
realignment.
AB
yeah.
109.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that whenever you do a crime, which is a felony, so there's misdemeanors and there's felonies. City attorney does misdemeanors. The district attorney does felonies. So that's a hard crime. When you do a hard crime, you're supposed to be in prison, okay? And now it's so crowded, they go, forget it. Let's stick to prisoners who are doing 20 years in the county jail. That's not supposed to be done,
No.
and they're overcrowded. So
Right.
you got a guy who's a drunk driver 3 times. He's finally in there, and he's dealing with a dude that chopped some guy's head off.
Right.
Like,
So
it's
they let the
crazy.
drunk driver go because
So they
they're gonna
let the
say,
drunk driver
"We
go
don't
because
have
it's a
any-"
non-violent crime, and he starts to go. And burglary is non-violent crime, and smashing my car window is non-violent, and stealing $900 worth of stuff out of the thing is not non-violent.
But it's the Prop 47.
That's kinda like
this
a
is,
tidal
look,
wave.
this is a big. This is look. This is a tall
He's like,
call
slow
for
down,
you.
pal, brother.
No,
Exactly.
Look, you hit the nail on the head. And those are crimes, and there should be consequences. Right. And when Prop 47, which was sold as a bill of goods, completely the wrong thing. To say that you can go into any Walgreens, you name the store,
right,
and steal $900 worth, and there's no consequences from that. When you can go out and do heroin and it's not a felony anymore and it's a misdemeanor. What we've seen is drug court has basically dried up in this state.
Right.
And that's not what we want. Right. Because you want, again, back to consequences for action. We want people to say, hey, we want you to get clean and sober.
Right.
And we want you to go through rehab and treatment. If you don't, you're going to spend some time in jail. You decide. That has completely gone off the table.
Done.
And again, back what I said earlier, and I feel so strongly about it, if you don't have a safe city, if you don't have a safe county, you don't have anything. And so when we see this continued spike in crime, and when we see these misguided, again, virtue signaling of folks who say, well, we should be defunding the police, and all of that was going on while I was still mayor. And I talked to my other colleagues who were mayors across California when some of them were thinking about doing this, and I said, don't do this. Are you crazy? I mean, and when I had hundreds of protesters out in front of my house for
I
for
remember
nights.
right in
It was
your
all
house.
It was all over the
Right.
news. Well, but yelling and screaming, me and my family, defund the police, defund the. I say, you know what? You could stay out here for a year.
Right.
I'm not going to defund the police. And in fact, we raised the budget
remember
by
that.
7%.
Right.
And why did I do that? Because if you want to have a great police department, if you are proud of our sheriff's deputies and if you are proud of our police officers that wear the badge, then you better darn well give them the tools and the training and the resources necessary to be successful.
Absolutely.
And that costs money. And all of those other big city mayors, and I won't name them,
Right.
but
You don't have to.
they all did it. And they all defunded their police
And they all-
departments. And guess what?
They all-
A year and a half later, they
Right.
all couldn't run back fast enough to
Right.
say, because of the spike in violent crime. And so that's why leadership is so important, that says we're going to do the right thing, not just what somebody perceives as the politically correct thing
Right.
of the moment.
That doesn't work.
It didn't work. We didn't
Right.
do that in San Diego. I was not going to allow that to happen while I was mayor.
Right.
And as a leader on the Board of Supervisors, we're going to support our sheriff's department. We're going to support our deputy district attorneys who are standing up for victims.
Right.
There's so much talk about, criminal and not enough focus on what about our victims,
about
our
the
victims
victims?
of crimes. And so that, I think, is incredibly important. If you don't have that balance, you're going to have a state that is going in the wrong direction, which it is. And again, we cannot allow that to happen in San Diego County.
said something-
You need folks that are going to make a tough stand that says, we're going to support safe neighborhoods.
You made a statement. I want to make sure our viewers heard. That's really important. The people are outside your house. Listen, if you have a mob outside your house, if you never have, it's not a cool thing. It's scary. You got your kids in there. You're not sure who's going to throw
your
the.
kids are flipping
Hold
out.
on. You don't know who's going to throw the first rock. You don't know if they're going to ambush you. It's not cool because you think they're peaceful protesters. We all saw peaceful protesters in LA when they burned it down. But Kevin said an important thing. He not only said, not only am I not defunding the police, he raised them by 7%. That's huge in the city budget. He gave them more money. No one else did that. And that's what I wanted. I want to say thank you because that's what we needed. And I don't want that thing because you kind of go, and I give him 7%. So I want to make sure they heard that.
But you know
because
what
that's
else I like?
That's an important
I
number.
like
right
when he
there.
said you can be out here for one day, you can be out here for 1 year.
They're not doing it, and they
I ain't
left.
doing it.
Right.
But see, that takes balls.
But let me go back to one. Let
you
me
know,
go back
you got to
one
do
thing.
it. Oh, sorry.
Well,
whatever.
If
You
you're
can
gonna
edit that out. But
Yeah, that takes guts.
I do.
You got to
Whatever-
say brass balls.
Whatever body part
Yeah,
you want to stick
whatever
in
you wanna
there.
say.
You know?
But I also want to say, and again, I give the credit to our department, and I give the department to our leadership and our officers,
Right.
and a department that has actually embraced reform. And so when I look at some of the reform and changes that have happened, for example, while I was mayor, we were the first big city in the country of any size that adopted body-worn cameras. When I look at the work
That's right.
that,
I remember.
that
Yeah,
we
which-
did in going away from, like, for example, just the carotid restraint and a bunch
Right.
best practices today
Right.
are not going to be the best practices 5 years from now. And so you have to have a culture that embraces that.
That's right.
And so that's why I felt so strongly about supporting our department, supporting the men and women that put their lives on the line. I'm going to do the same at the county with our deputies again and our district attorneys, because they are ensuring a safe climate for us, and you better darn well give that support, because if you don't, that's not going to be a county that people want to live in.
Okay, I was going to tell you something. You did something. You keep saying cool stuff, but I want to make sure they hear it. Kevin, when you had the person getting choked out, he was talking about, that's called a carotid restraint. Because if you do it right, you're not choking someone. You're not stopping the airway. You're stopping the blood flow to the brain into carotid arteries, and then you leave a little area here to breathe. But before he got the pressure and before he even thought, he just said, we're not doing that anymore. He's the first guy in the big city that goes, we're not doing the chokehold, which is really called the carotid restraint, because no cops are choking, but someone died. So you're proactive on that too. So you give to the cops, but you keep them in line. That's what my whole point is.
Look, you have to be.
It's a check and balance.
It's always going to be a check and balance. And again, if you're in an elected position, you think things are always fine, you don't want to make any changes, that's not somebody who you want.
Right.
You want somebody who's going to say, we're going to have to look at things fairly. You're going to have to be open-minded, and you always have to be looking at, particularly in law enforcement, because ultimately our law enforcement officers are successful because they have the respect and the support of our community.
Right.
If you don't have that, you don't have anything. And so it's important on leadership for the department to do that. It's important for the elected official leadership to do that. But you have to weigh changes. You have to weigh reforms that says, are we going to actually help? Are we going to increase this? What you cannot do is just that what we saw in the whole defund, the police movement, saying, we're just going to arbitrarily make some changes that are going to make us less safe.
Right.
That was the craziest thing. And to this day, those elected officials that still supported that, and still do, by the way, you're missing the entire point, which is you want a well-trained, you want a community-based law enforcement, because that's how you keep your city safe. And that takes dollars to do that, training to do that. It takes oversight to do that. And so it's hard work. You don't just say, we're going to cut everybody's budget. That's the worst thing you can do.
So we have a lot of cops out there. I remember when I was a cop, so there was a question. The guy goes, what do you think your job is? I remember in the academy, I always remember this. What do you think your main job is? You're like, enforce the law, right? Because I'm a cop, of course. And he goes, no. Your job is to try to maintain voluntary compliance of the law. And I thought about that, maintain voluntary compliance. So when you take away the cops, you can't maintain that compliance. When you have cops at the corners, like in downtown, we had the beach team out there, people knew, they voluntarily knew, hey, I don't want to go to jail. There's a cop right there. Don't screw around. So you're maintaining voluntary. And if you have good cops, you calm the guy down. You don't go up to a guy who's smoking a joint in a Metallica concert because it's illegal. Now it's legal, but before, and say, put that joint away or I'm going to arrest you.
Well, that's where the conflict between law and order is. Enforcing the law, you disrupt the order.
Right, there you go.
But
so
one thing...
he had that balance. But let me say one more thing, Mark.
Go ahead.
Because
you can say whatever you want.
The way I look at it, I'm paying a lot of taxes. Everyone's paying taxes. I pay taxes that pay for streets, sidewalks, signs, cops, firefighters. Am I right so far?
You're
so
right.
why can I not sue a class action lawsuit against the city for allowing eminent domain on the public fairway? These tents are in my eminent domain, taking a public that we own.
I think because
how are they allowing it?
I think because it belongs to the public, and you don't have standing. Like if it was in your front yard, you could probably sue.
Well, I think you've solved that by having the right leadership.
There you go.
Going to say, here's what we're going to accept, and here's what we're not going to accept.
It's that easy.
That's why elections matter.
Right.
And again, that's why I think this is such an opportunity for us here in San Diego County to really be statewide leaders. To say we're gonna tackle head on, man. I mean, head on the issue of homelessness, issue of public safety, the issue of housing, to make sure we're actually and these are things that you can do. You know that you're not going to make everybody happy when you're in politics.
Who cares?
I learned that a long time ago.
And not everyone's going to like you, Kevin.
But hey, trust me, I know that. But I also know, Frank, that if you don't actually act, if you don't do anything, and you want to take the path of least resistance, which is what I'm seeing,
thank you.
then nothing is going to happen.
No,
and nothing is going to change.
Something's going to happen. It's going to get worse.
It's going to get worse.
Okay, all right. So now we did homeless,
Right.
and we did housing.
Right.
I got another.
We're on crime.
We're at crime.
Okay.
But I have another one.
You got
I got a fourth one.
Okay.
what are we going to do with these sexually violent predators that they're all sticking in like these locations near schools, and these people are just crying and saying, why do I have like 7 of these guys?
Not a guy's been arrested once, multiple.
No, but these guys are like career
predators.
psychotic sociopaths
Right.
that prey on children.
Right.
You wouldn't want him anywhere near me. So,
No.
but you're probably going to get this. What do we do with those guys?
Back to consequences for actions, okay?
Right.
And back to saying what we're going to accept and not accept, and to say we're not going to allow what we've seen, particularly as the proposals to just keep dumping folks in the portions of East County, thinking that's not going to work. No,
Right.
You
There
need
you
to
go.
step up and to say we're going to ensure there's a place for folks, but it's not going to be in our neighborhoods, in our schools,
Right.
And we're going to stand up and do the right thing, and again, not just put your hands up and say it's just kind of going
way
to
it
happen,
is, right.
and not stand up for consequences for actions. And governing is about making those decisions. Governing is about saying we're gonna take stands. Because when you don't do that, if you just hide behind the bureaucracy, if you hide behind it's out of my hands, well then what are you there for? And so again, why I've decided to run. Because I think we have a real opportunity in San Diego County right now to be leaders, to make a huge difference. And again, as somebody who was fortunate enough to be elected several times in the city of San Diego, to say we're gonna make an actual difference. And you've known my style as somebody who can work across party lines, somebody who's going to be able to say, hey, we're gonna, we're not gonna run from some of these issues, and know that you're gonna have somebody that's gonna say, you know what, guys,
Frank,
let's go make some decisions.
Kevin's
I didn't even know, like for years, before I looked at politics differently, I thought you were a Democrat. I wasn't sure, like, if you're a Democrat.
I never thought he was a Democrat, but I knew that.
No. But I'm not talking about.
I'm
I'm not talking about today's Democrat, Mark.
Didn't-
Because there was a time where
No.
we all got
He's
along. But he's hardcore, but he's kind. Like he's hard.
Well, he's normal.
Right, he's normal.
He's like
Like,
a
when you
normal
talk
thinking
to him.
guy. Like
But Kevin, this is what I like.
he's-
I'll
look,
take the normal compliment.
I'm going to
Thank
tell
I
you, Frank.
appreciate that.
Here's
No, I think
here's
he's
what
more
I thought.
hardcore.
Because I saw him because I was in we ran together in a lot of different elections, but he got along with his Democratic counterparts.
I saw it, that's what I
they
mean.
didn't hate him.
Right.
They respected him.
Right.
And they may
That was
not
my
have-
point.
They may not agree, but he held a level of respect
That's what I mean.
that you just you
The
don't see it
Democrat-
with some of the current leaders because they're just so they're so far off to the left thinking you know why? Because they have no experience.
Well,
Education, experience, and training. That's what he has. We can't put a rookie in there. We can't put a flip-flop in there. We are the city, Kevin, Mark and I have our feet on the street. We are brokers. We are California brokers. We sell homes. We go on the street. We talk to people. We talk to people who are going through divorces. We talk to people having
all
economic impact.
communities.
We're talking to people who have homeless. And everywhere we go. I'm telling you, if we don't get leadership in the city, this city is going to be history.
The county.
The county. Okay, everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah, the county. So, and that powerful position in the county is what we need to affect this city. So, hopefully, we see him in that chair.
they ran it into the ground.
And another thing I was going to tell you is
Not-
I
not-
have worked with Kevin, and I'm going to tell you what I think I could tell you the difference between you and others. Okay, and this is good. Don't worry. 'Cause
And don't
Kevin-
insult him anymore.
Yeah, Kevin, no,
you need to
I
stop
said-
that.
well, you call me
Well,
normal, so that's,
okay, good.
Crazy talk here.
Let me replace it. I saw him speaking with a lot of people on the other side of the aisle, and they listened to him. Okay,
Yeah, they respect
He wasn't
him.
a hard right. He was a middle, getting problem solved. Okay,
Well, you're a problem solver.
a conservative.
Well, I
that
will
knows
take
how to
that.
talk.
I
But
appreciate.
here's
that.
what I saw about you.
Yeah.
You surround yourself. I'm talking about your staff now, with great people. And if you want to be great, you better surround yourself around great people, not good people. These guys are all good. So when you call his team, things get done.
Well-
and Kevin is not worried about somebody not liking him. That's
Because
what
if
I
you
like
want
about
to-
him. Because if it's the right thing, he's a spear.
Here's what I'd say: if you want to stand out, then be outstanding. And he's been outstanding. There you go.
Better win, Kevin.
No.
Yeah, you got the Powell brothers here supporting you.
No, thank you. Very nice compliments. And I've tried to
Trying to get you motivated.
as you know, I've tried to say there's enough partisanship at the national level and all that. It's about working with people.
Right.
And if you want to be effective in a major American city and county, you better darn well know how to work across party lines. And you ought to, again, you have to have your eye focused on what's the results, because you can go out and do press conferences all day, and if you actually don't get anything done, so what?
Right.
Right.
I'm not interested in that.
Right.
I worked very closely with my colleagues on the city council while I was mayor.
Right.
I worked, very closely with our organized labor groups.
Right.
Right.
I was very proud of the relationships that we had with organized labor, because we had great city employees. I want to treat you fairly. I want to pay you fairly. I want to make working conditions good. I just think that that's common sense. And when I look back at the years that I was mayor, we had phenomenal, great relationships
It
with,
was
with
good.
organized
San
labor.
Diego was so nice.
Worked closely with environmental groups and the work that we did on our climate action plan. I mean, and again, we care about our clean water in San Diego. We care
course.
about our clean air. We care about our open spaces. And so again, let's work together on policies that actually move the ball. Let's
Right.
work on policies that move the needle. And I always, my style was bring in folks on both sides, and that we'd say, okay, here's something that's coming down the pike. Listen to people's views.
Right.
I like to think I know, a little bit about a few things.
Oh, you
but
do.
guess what?
Yeah.
You're going to learn a whole lot more when you bring in folks that say, hey, let's argue some of the pros and cons. And when you do that, I think you're going to have a government that's more responsive. You're going to have one that's more thoughtful. But I think most importantly, you're going to have one that actually makes a difference.
So he touched upon working with labor groups, and
Right.
I just want to backtrack
Okay.
because this is important.
Yeah.
When they wanted to defund the police, I'm sure that the Peace Officers Association, the POA, was the labor arm of the police, were like going, "Oh, what's he going to do?" And you go up to him and go, "Guess what? I ain't going to defund you.
Right.
I'm going to increase your salary."
Right.
Like, that's when you have somebody working with labor groups. I'm sure that they go, "What? You're gonna give us more money?" And you're like, "Yeah, because
Well, sure, because we need to.
Right.
Again, if you're going to make it safe, you have to have officers that are trained, and you have to have more of them.
Right, thank you.
And so if you don't, and if you have that climate that officers don't want to be a part of that department, they're going to leave.
Right.
And we saw that in other positions in the city too. I worked very closely with the folks at our Municipal Employees Association. Worked very closely with folks in ASME, and I had again, my approach was, come on in and meet with me once a month, and I would do that. Don't just talk to the department heads. Come meet with me.
Right.
Tell me what's working. Tell me what's not working. That's how you solve problems.
Right.
And some of these groups did not support me when I was first running, but we ended up having a very great relationship because they knew that I meant what I said, and we were going to not even only treat people fair, but look, I want San Diego to be the best. We're in a competitive environment
Right.
too. I don't want folks going to other places. I want
Right.
to say San Diego is where you want to stay. San Diego is where you want to raise your family.
Right.
And so I think we were able to make some pretty significant changes that helped.
One thing I do know about you, Kevin, is that you do love the environment. You love the ocean. You help the lifeguards. You helped us when we're lifeguarding with the public safety, increasing the staff, and it's paid off. You care about what goes in the water, and you're working also with TJ to try to figure out that problem with all their sewage spilling into Imperial Beach. I've seen you out there. You're an environmentalist, and whoever doesn't think so, I know it for sure because I've seen them do it. And you care about the environment. And that's what
I'll tell you, Frank, I got
all
my start
across.
in wanting to get involved in San Diego because I was a volunteer
Yeah.
on the Mission Bay Park Committee. Love Mission Bay Park and,
Yeah.
and what that means to so many families. I mean, it's the aquatic jewel,
It's
and
beautiful.
it's free and open to everyone.
Right.
And when I saw what the city wasn't doing, was taking all the revenue out of Mission Bay and the hotels and others that was supposed to stay there
Right.
for environmental improvements, wetland upgrades, all that, and they were just siphoning it away.
Right.
I said, wait a second, that's not right.
Right.
And so I said, I'm going to run for that district and actually do something about it. And while I was mayor, I felt so strongly about it that there was a ballot measure that we helped put on the ballot that said, hey, we're going to insist that in perpetuity, all of the money generated for Mission Bay stays in Mission Bay and our regional parks.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I grew up in Park and Rec
Right,
as
right.
a kid.
Yeah, well, I was
and
in
so,
Park and
man,
Rec
our
as
open
well.
spaces are important. And so,
Huge.
again, that's why I think I'm in a unique position that says, don't just take no for an answer, brother. Let's make some changes.
Okay, like I always say this all the time, Mark, I'm going to say it again. You don't just need the experience, training, education, and background, but you need the wisdom. And if you're sitting 8 years in the city, you got the wisdom that we need.
16.
Well, I'm just talking about the city council. 2
Okay.
terms.
Yeah.
And then the actual hot seat, making decisions. That's 8 solid years. And you start to learn and you do develop wisdom. That's something that people don't have. They get up there and they say, we need change, we need this, we need that. And they have all the talking points. But we've seen him in action. San Diego has seen Kevin in action. We have a live guy.
They know who he is.
Oh, they know who he is. Everyone knows.
But
Did you say they don't know who he is?
no, I said they do know who
they
he
know
is.
who he is, right.
That's 16 years.
Yeah, so it seems like the obvious next leap is the county.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just like,
Well, it should have been the state, but
Yeah, it
you
should have
know,
been the
it should
state,
have been the
Kevin.
state. Like
maybe
that would
That's a whole other topic.
Yeah,
one day on the
but look,
That's
Frank,
another podcast.
Let me
Wrap
just
it
share.
up.
No, I'm not going to wrap it up. We got one more.
Kevin needs to go.
No,
soon.
no,
He's-
I got just one more because we did
Time for one more. Okay.
homelessness,
Time for one more.
crime. We did labor. We
Right.
did housing.
Right.
We did the binational
environmental.
This is it. Can you get these guys at Sandag in order? I
No.
mean, like,
No.
is that too much? Like,
Yeah. That's a
'cause
whole other YouTube.
people don't even
It
understand.
is a whole other issue.
Right.
I will just
But
say.
can you help a little bit? Because
No, seriously, we'll bring him on because that is a big issue. Because that.
do you want us to bring you
Okay,
back?
sounds
Yeah,
great. I
let's
know
do
we're
it
running out
again.
of time.
We're
Look,
running out of
that's
time,
what we
Mark.
call a tease for next time.
Right,
right?
Yeah,
That's a
but
tease.
no, I'm
Very
going to tell
good.
you, Sandag, they've got some things going on, and they just need somebody to hone them in.
It's literally another 2-hour
That's a
discussion.
San Diego Association of Governments, and
right.
that's an important.
It's a huge.
That's where the county gets all
We're in
the.
one of the biggest cities in America. This is no joke. It
I'm,
seems
I'm
like
back next time. I'm on it.
Yeah, you're back.
Yeah, that
hey,
would be a
Kevin.
good one.
Yeah.
I
Hey,
appreciate you. Good luck,
It's
Kevin,
great,
thank you
great
so
to see you
much.
both
Thank
guys.
you for
Keep
being
up.
open and honest.
Yeah.
And this is going
My
to
pleasure.
go out. And, you think about our future. Everyone in San Diego, we need some help. All you got to do is go on any street in any neighborhood now. They're homeless everywhere. You're talking about this La Jolla. There's homeless in La Jolla. Go down there. Downtown is getting
Vista,
ruined.
El Cajon,
El Cajon.
Encinitas, Del Mar.
Everywhere. The
Everywhere.
County. We all
San
see it. We all see
Marcos.
the bad drugs. We
Right.
see the crime. We see the homelessness. It's time for a huge change. So thanks for watching. We'll see you guys later.
It's a
We're
wrap.
out. That's a wrap.